Hello everyone. Welcome back. I am Kris. This video was sponsored by Mohamed. This is the century, America's time, 1914 to 1919 shell shock. We did the beginning seeds of change apparently 1 year ago. Probably a little longer than that. So I gotta jump onto these. This will be a two-parter, 22 minutes or so. So, all the other stuff. Click on that like button if you could. Subscribe to the channel. Helps me out. There's a thanks button here. You can click on that. Donate just like Mohamed did. Request a video. Your name sponsors that video. Sorry, my nose itched. All right. It's been a terrible day. Let's get into a good video.
I am the Edison photograph.
Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor by air.
Ask not what your country can do.
Kennedy has been shot.
One small step for man.
These truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
I don't remember him telling Mr. Gorbachev to tear down that wall in 1914 to 1919. I mean, Reagan was alive, but I don't think he was president yet. I think he was 14. I don't remember when Reagan was born. I think this video is full of lies. I'm just joking.
Pier 54, New York City. On May the 1st, 1915, 2,000 passengers boarded one of the fastest, most luxurious ships in the world, the Lusitania.
She was simply a wonderful, steady ship. She had 4 red funnels, and she was a beautiful sight to see. She really was.
Eda Stanley and her family were heading home to England and into the midst of the most brutal conflict man had ever experienced. The First World War was almost a year old, and any transatlantic crossing was made potentially dangerous by the presence of German submarines. Still, the passengers felt safe. After all, the Lusitania was a passenger ship. On her last day at sea, the Lusitania was approaching the Irish coast.
It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you could see all this coastline. It was a beautiful day, couldn't have been any better. And then bang! It was a terrific bang. Dad knew what he was. I mean, that he knew darn well it was a torpedo.
The single German torpedo did such damage that the Lusitania could launch only 6 of her lifeboats before she went down.
We could not take the people in that were begging to be taken in. I mean, we would have capsized and everybody would have gone. 1,200 drowned, didn't they? I think it was 1,200 drowned. More drowned than were saved.
Among those who drowned were 128 Americans. The memory has faded for all but a very few, some of whom you'll hear from. But because it has affected so much of what has happened since, the bulk of this program is about the First World War, the Great War, they called it. It began in June of 1914 with the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. He was shot by a Serbian nationalist in Sarajevo.
You know, Peter Jennings is terrible. He should issue spoiler alerts in case some of us don't know about the First World War.
Ferdinand had governed in a circle of European royalty that also included...
Can you imagine if that was serious? Somebody would be like, really? You okay? You dumb?
The King of England, the Tsar of Russia, and the Kaiser of Germany. And together, their colonial empires dominated most of the Earth's population. And when the competitive Kaiser seized upon the assassination as a pretext to begin a European war, he found the other royals only too willing to go along. All of them sought to widen their influence. None could possibly realize how radically they were about to alter the course of the 20th century. In the summer of 1914, the generation that would fight the First World War was enthusiastic about doing so. Those young men who were so quick to answer their nation's call to arms had no reason to anticipate the hell ahead. In the German city of Koblenz, 12-year-old Joachim von Elbe began a diary.
August 5, 1914. The city is full of soldiers. They were singing this song, on, to fight we are born, on, to fight for the fatherland. To Kaiser Wilhelm we have sworn, to Kaiser Wilhelm we give our hand.
The optimism of the Germans was matched by their allies in Austria and by their enemies in Russia, in France, and in England.
As soon as I enlisted, I was in a crowd of other 18, 19 and 20-year-olds, and we thought it was going to be a tremendous lark to go and knock the Kaiser off his throne, you see.
Everyone thought the war would be over at Christmas. And they really badly wanted to get to France to get in the fighting.
The Germans attacked first, and very quickly they were through Belgium and into France. The romantic notion of war that so many young men carried into battle was very quickly shattered.
Where do you think that comes from? The romanticism of war. You think that's just the older, lining up in lines and shooting, and it's the gentleman way of fighting. You didn't hide behind trees and all this. I died a hero. I died, not a hero. What is it they would say? I didn't die a coward. I died a man facing my opponent, and blah, 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 blah. How long do you think that has been since guns, since gunpowder, facing your opponent in that line and shooting? Like, the romanticism of war has always been weird to me. I respect the hell out of people who go and fight, and you'll never hear me bashing you, but I've always just found that so weird and it's I can read about, I'm reading about Benjamin Harrison. I'm volume 3 of his book. He treats it the same way, like it was, it's what you did. It was a manly thing to do. And it, it's the same kind of thing. Like, I don't know. It's just a weird thing to me. Maybe because I wasn't in war, but I don't know.
The new weapons of war were so ferocious that by the end of the first year, French casualties alone would approach 1 million men.
Nobody in Europe expected these appalling casualties. And when they came, they were utterly crushing. The first dreadful experience was that of the the victims of what was called the Massacre of the Innocents in Germany. These boys from high school or college who were given a couple of months' training and sent off to the front, and who died in tens of thousands in a few weeks. Nothing like that had ever happened before to any country in Europe. And moreover, this was the flower of German youth. They were the best educated young men. They were from middle-class families almost exclusively. And they had no expectation at all that this terrible thing was going to happen.
Americans had never dreamed that a war on the other side of the ocean could affect them. The U.S. was officially neutral, and most of its citizens assumed it would stay that way.
People were going about their own business, object being to make money, good business. Everything was very pleasant indeed.
I can understand why we would try to remain neutral. I mean, you know, the French and Indian War happened here in 1750s to 60s. We didn't really have a choice. I mean, that was 7 Years' War. Revolutionary War, didn't have a choice. War of 1812, we did have a choice. We declared war. And then we were shocked how fast Napoleon got beat at Waterloo. And we were like, oh, now they're going to focus on us. Huh. That kind of backfired, didn't it? Spanish-American War, late 1800s. I mean, there was the Mexican-American War, but that's isolated here. Civil War, yeah, isolated here. Yeah. I mean, the War of 1812 to the First World War is 102 years. Even if you go to the end of the War of 1812, which is 1815. So 99 years of America war-free. We weren't war-free, but war-free in terms of no, that's not true, because Spanish-American War. But no, Spanish-American War, we went to the Philippines and stuff like that. So I'm just trying to think when we went out. You know, like England came here in 1812 to 1815, and then it was us fighting ourselves. Mexican-American War, Civil War. Spanish-American War would have been the next one, and that was us going to Cuba, Philippines. Man, did we go somewhere else? So my point was, and I apologize, was that we just hadn't really gone anywhere. You know, it was always kind of here. We were fighting ourselves, or we were fighting Mexico, which was a stupid war anyways. So we had 65 to 1900s. Oh, McKinley, when did you start that war? When did you fight that war? So maybe my point, my thinking is backfiring as I'm thinking of it. It is.
It's hard for people who weren't there then to realize how enormously the world has changed. On New Year's Day, President Wilson had open house at the White House. And you could go down, and we went down once. I was a little kid, I was taken along. Went down, and stood in a little queue, and it moved up, and we all went through and shook his hand. Shook hands with the president on New Year's Day.
But certainly America was changing. the pace of life was quickening. Almost overnight, Henry Ford's historic assembly line had lowered the cost of making cars, as well as the cost of buying them. The mass-produced Model T came in one color, black. But at $295, it was the first car priced within reach of ordinary Americans.
We played baseball in the streets, and there was no problem playing baseball when horses and wagons dominated the traffic. It only became a problem when automobiles and trucks came in.
So much in America was changing.
I moved like I was one of those kids. That's a free-for-all on the street. Oh man, I wonder how many people got hit by cars.
Changing as Europe went about its ugly war.
At this first movie that I attended, I recall the scene where there was a great deal of shooting.
And somebody yelled, "Gadzooks!"
As they came to the front of the screen, and the figures got larger and larger, and I thought they were coming at me, and I started screaming so badly that they had to take me out of the movie house.
As movie-making techniques improved, movies became an American obsession. And it was in the movie houses that Americans were exposed to the war in Europe. In the movie house, it still seemed glamorous.
We went every Saturday morning and just devoured the pictures of the war. Beautiful uniforms and the dashing mounted cavalry with their flashing sabers in the sun riding into battle, and oh, I thought that would be something else. I was just aching to go.
The movies were the perfect proving ground for the new art form called propaganda. Americans saw and soon sympathized with the British view of the Germans. By early 1915, the war in Europe was good for America. U.S. banks were lending huge amounts of money to Britain and France, who in turn used the money to buy.
The dog keeps laying against this table, and he keeps wanting to push it and knock it over. And I keep telling him to move, and he just like thinks I'm joking.
Arms from American factories. With the war, Americans were in the greatest economic boom in their history.
During the war, everybody worked. Before the war, my father brought home $6 or $7 a week. Now he brought home checks for $100, $110 a week. It was like bringing home a check for $1 million.
The war had another effect. It virtually cut off European immigration to the United States, causing a labor shortage in American factories. And that forced northern employers to look for the very first time at the substantial black labor pool of the American South.
Black newspapers who went down south and told them, come on up to Chicago with us. We'll get you a job and take care of you. You don't have to stay down here and be lynched and burned.
My relatives, aunt, uncle, cousins, came north. We were able to get into factories and steel mills, jobs that just wouldn't have been available to blacks under normal circumstances.
This great migration from the South kept America's economy strong and vigorous, while the increasing economic stake in Britain and France encouraged greater support for their war against the Germans. But the war was not going well. and the idea that Americans might yet have to be involved was now an issue. All over the United States, with the support of former President Theodore Roosevelt, potential volunteers began to train for battle. By Christmas 1914, the armies of Europe had completely bogged down and fighting had spread to Russia, Africa, and the Middle East. The empires drew on their colonies for manpower. 60 countries were eventually represented in the conflict. The Germans had expected to win in 42 days.
Be right back. I gotta get some popcorn. Okay, I am back. Popcorn time.
But they had not anticipated what would happen on the Western Front in France. On the Western Front, the German assault had finally failed, and soldiers on both sides had raced to dig an elaborate trench system that stretched for 300 miles, from the English Channel all the way to Switzerland. On New Year's Day in 1915, the young men who had gone off to fight glorious battles were now trapped in a desperate war of attrition.
Someone said to us excitedly, "Jack Smith." I said, "What about him?" "He's dead, he's been shot." The first one of the battalion to be shot. I said, "What?" "Yes, he's dead, he's been shot. He put his head too far over and a sniper got him." And that caused a bit of a sensation amongst the lads. They thought, well, this is not exactly what we come for kind of business. But later on, from that day onwards, when we went to the trenches, it was 3 killed, 4 killed, 5 killed, 20 killed, 100 killed. By then, we was veterans.
A young American poet, Alan Seeger, was among those looking for adventure when he joined the Foreign Legion to fight for France. His diary reveals how seldom he found it.
It's a miserable life, shivering in these wretched holes in the dirt. We're not leading the life of men at all, but that of animals, living in our holes in the ground, and only showing our heads outside to fight and to feed.
When we'd been there about 6 months, covered in mud, wet through practically all day, absolutely chewed up my lice. We used to say, and to think we wanted to come to this hole. I said, yes, we didn't know.
Every so often, one side or the other seized a few hundred yards of territory only to be forced back again, surrendering what had cost hundreds of lives to win. The front never moved more than a mile or two in either direction. By the spring of 1915, the generals had concluded that the best way out of the stalemate was to blast the enemy out of their trenches. The same factories and assembly lines that had begun to contribute to life in the 20th century were now retooled to create massive killing machines. This was the industrialization of war.
There were just the splintered trunks of trees, and there was the quagmire of the shell holes, and no grass. It was just like a lunar landscape, really.
At night, the rats, they grew to enormous sizes, feeding on the corpses there. It was impossible to get the dead buried.
We put dead bodies in the bottom of the trench so that we could stand on them to keep dry. And on some occasion, dead bodies was put on the top of the trench to make it higher, so that we could walk a bit better instead of crouching.
And contributing to the stalemate were new weapons. By now, the machine gun had been perfected to the point that a single soldier could command as much firepower as 40 riflemen. The tank made its first appearance, invented by the British to get through the dense thickets of barbed wire that protected the enemy trenches. And in April 1915, the Germans introduced the most terrifying weapon of all.
That's interesting that the tanks were used to get over barbed wire, or to run it over to get your men over. And how far we've advanced with the use of tanks, like what they're used for now. That's kind of crazy.
Poison gas.
No one had ever seen it before. This is the moment when chemical warfare was invented. It scared the living daylights out of the Canadian troops that were hit by it.
The First World War had become a contest not of fighting spirit, but of technological might. And for the soldiers caught in the middle of it, there was no way forward and no way back. There was simply endurance.
You saw a little bush, and you swore that bush was somebody creeping up on you. The perfect soldier then in that war would have been somebody with no imagination whatsoever. We all had too much imagination.
So many men who had been through these dangers and anxieties, their nerve broke and they were the victims of shell shock, There is a breaking point for most people, for everybody really. Robbed of all humanity and courage and everything else that makes life worth living, really. He's descended to something less than human.
The stalemate in the trenches continued through 1915 and into 1916, when the generals decided to go back to their original weapon, their men. The River Somme, northern France, early summer 1916. Along a front 25 miles wide, a massive Allied army prepared to attack. Thousands of British Tommies, as they were called, would lead the charge, and they would follow one of the most intense bombardments in the history of warfare.
What a great place to pause. That, and I also I need more iced tea. Perfectly halfway. All right. Okay, well, we're going to pause this. I got to get another, well, we're going to end the video. I'm going to get a drink and I'm going to jump right back into this. So, ow. Until next time, have a good day, have a good night. Oh, by the way, the guys that they showed suffering from shell shock, I would want to kill myself. And I know that's not the right thing to say, but there's no way I would want to live like that. That's just devastating. All right. Till next time. Have a good day. Have a good night.